again. I see a lot of the same faces here. It's good to have you, and thank you for supporting the museum. Today we have a really special treat. Our speaker is Paige Rickerd. She works with the operations department over at Santa Anita Park, and she runs the Seabiscuit Tours, so she has all that information up here in her head. She's also a former trainer and owner, and she's been working up at the racetrack since the 80s.
I started in 85.
So we're really happy to have her today. Are you good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So can we give a hand for Paige? Oh, she also was very instrumental in helping with information on this exhibit too.
When you're watching this video, please notice the receiving barn, the George Woolf statue, and the Seabiscuit statue, because I'll be talking about that.
before we just came in. That was kind of.
Was that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've never been at the track before.
Oh, that's
Brought us there.
amazing.
We just, that's, I gave him one of my things. We took one away and put this together.
That's great.
To let you know where I'm coming from, I actually started working in the barn area at Santa Anita in 1985, walking hot horses around in a circle at 4:45 in the morning. I was called a hot walker. And since '89, I've worked in the operations department, and since '91, I've had a trainer's license. I currently own 9 horses, so I love to talk about horses, and that's why I'm doing this. I also do the Santa Anita tours, as she had said, the Seabiscuit Tours, which we offer on weekends when we're racing live at 8:30 and at 9:45 in the morning. When the horses are going to go over to race, we have what's called the 20-minute call, and they will actually lead the horse over from the barn over into the receiving barn, that round barn, 20 minutes, an hour before the race, so it's still the 20-minute call going into the race. So if the race is at 1, at 12 o'clock, they make the call. Now the groom leads the horse over. The first person to see the horse is a horseshoe identifier. Baseball players have cleats on the bottom of their shoes. Racehorses have toe grabs on the bottom of their shoes so that they can grab a hold of the ground. So we have that person checking for those shoes. Then the horse is led into the receiving barn, and we have a horse identifier. She will ask the groom to flip up the horse's lip so that she can see the horse's tattoo for identification purposes. She will have copies of the horse's papers and pictures of the horse to make sure it's the right horse in there for the right race. Now, actually, the paperwork is done on these horses at between 4 to 6 months of age. A horse identifier will go to the farm. They'll take pictures of the horse, front, rear, and both sides, and pull about 50 strands of mane for DNA purposes. They ship that along with their $200 check to the jockey club. They're then issued the papers. Now, once the horses come to the racetrack, you put the papers in the racing office and say, okay, I'd like my horse tattooed. Well, then what they do is the horse identifier from Santa Anita will pull the papers, look at the horse. If they do not match exactly, that horse will not be tattooed until those papers are corrected by the jockey club. Sometimes it's a long, drawn-out process, but by the time they get into that receiving barn, everything should be okay. Now, each horse is given a tattoo for racing purposes, and it's on the inside of their upper lip. And what it is, it's a letter first indicating what year the horse was foaled, and then they all have their individual number. How they give the horse the tattoo is they'll actually back him into the corner of his stall. They have something that holds the lip up, and then let's say if it's an A first, it'll be a whole bunch of needles shaped in the form of an A. They press it in ink and then push it onto the horse's gum, and then they go to the number. After the tattoo is done, they will take a picture of it, they let the horse go, and he goes right back to eating or whatever he was doing. The whole process may take about 10 minutes. Now, also in that receiving barn, the blood is taken from each and every horse before they go over and run. And then the grooms are each given a bib that says which number they're leading around, so that it's very easy to identify that. And after all that's been done, I should back up for a second, because what'll happen is sometimes the trainers will go ahead in the receiving barn and they'll put tongue ties and blinkers on in there so that they don't have to take that time to do it down in the saddling paddock. And there's several reasons why we put tongue ties on horses, but one is a horse can actually be clever enough to get his tongue over the bit. And when that happens, now the rider is no longer in charge, the horse is, so that's really scary. Or we get some horses that just want to chomp on the bit and not pay attention to what they're doing. Now this is an actual tongue tie, and the only problem with the tongue tie is when you're fixing it and getting it ready to put in the horse's mouth, the horse starts looking at it too, and he's like, oh my goodness, it's tongue tie time. And what they'll actually do is clamp their mouth shut, suck that tongue back, head up in the air and say, yeah, right, go ahead and try it. So what we have to do is reach in the horse's mouth, pull his tongue out to the side, wrap this around the tongue, and then tie it underneath their chin. As soon as the horse is done racing or exercising, we do take it off of them immediately, but it really is for the best interest of the horse as well as the rider. Now we also, put blinkers a lot of times on horses because they don't stay focused, and when they're out on the track, they'll start looking up in the grandstand, and I wonder who's here looking at me and just not paying attention. So I brought a set of blinkers. The ears go here, the eyes here. So we'll put these on. But some horses, they still have to feel that competition and see it a little bit. So what we'll actually do in the cups is put a little bit of a hole there so they still can see a horse when it's coming up alongside of them. So sometimes you'll put a bigger hole than this, smaller hole, it just depends on the horse. Some cups are even extended out even further than this. It really varies, and it depends on the horse. So after all that stuff has been done in the receiving barn, they'll say put them in so that they leave there in order. Now after the race is run, they come back to the test barn part of the receiving barn, and that's where they bring back the winner of every race, first, second, third of the $100,000 stake race, and 7 to 9 random checks, maybe a favorite that ran poorly or a long shot that ran well. Well, in that area, again, we take a blood sample, but now we also have to collect a urine sample. So we have to teach our horses to go to the restroom on command, and we do that by whistling to them. And we actually have to teach them that as well in the mornings. When they come back from exercising, they're hot, they're thirsty. We walk them around that toe ring, keep offering them water, keep walking them, eventually give them a bath, and then when they're completely cooled down, we will go ahead and put them in their stall and start circling them and whistling to them. When they go to the restroom, we whistle the whole entire time. When they stop, we stop. It's very important they learn how to do that because I've actually had to walk a horse for 3 hours in that receiving barn so that the representatives could get that urine sample. So they're not real happy with you either when a horse doesn't want to go. Now there's several reasons why we take blood before the horse runs and then we take it again after. Horses are given certain medications, and when they're making sure that they were given the medication, that they didn't get too much of it, and that they weren't given something else. A lot of the horses will run with Bute and Lasix. Bute is given the night before they're going to run. It's like us taking 2 aspirin the night before we go to bed. And then we'll give horses, a lot of them, Lasix, because they'll have exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhaging, where little blood vessels will pop and they'll actually bleed when they do physical exercise, and sometimes blood will even come out their nostrils. We give them the Lasix shot 4 hours prior to their post time because it lowers their blood pressure in hopes that the horse does not bleed. Now let me tell you, within 2 to 3 minutes after the horse is given that shot, you don't have to worry about whistling anymore. They will start going to the bathroom right away, and they can actually lose up to 20 pounds of fluid by that shot alone. So also about horses, their heart actually weighs between 7 to 10 pounds. Secretariat's heart weighed 21 pounds. When they're standing quietly in their stall, their heart rate is between 35 to 40 beats per minute. When they go out and do physical exercise, it goes up to 200 to 240 beats per minute. When they are in full stride from their front hoof to their rear hoof, there is an average of 19 feet in between their legs. They're very impressive. Also, they peak out right at about 40 miles an hour. And all race horses, they share the same birthday. It's January 1st. If you have a horse that was foaled December 15th, January 1st, it's a year old. So you don't want that to happen. If it's born in June, January 1st, it's a year old. So the best time is January, February, and March, really, to have the babies. Now, after they leave that receiving barn, they go down to the saddling paddock, and that is where they get their saddles put on. And then down there, we have boxes at each end, down where they get the saddles. And that's for horses that get down there, and if we have a crowd of people standing in front of them, the horse will actually look at all those people and they say, oh no, I don't think so. I'm not going to put up with this. So we actually have to saddle those horses in their boxes. Once they're saddled, they then come out and walk with everyone else. Then they go out to the walking ring, and that is where the owners and trainers meet with the jockeys. They give them any last minute instructions, and the riders given a leg up, and out onto the track they go. Now let's just say that today we're racing at Santa Anita, and the first race is a claiming race, and that means that all the horses are up for sale in that race. I'm a licensed owner-trainer. I'm going to put a claim in for one of these horses. But on the way to the gate, the rider says to the veterinarian that we have out on the track, this horse feels a little funny behind. And the vet looks at the horse and says, you're right, we're going to scratch it. I don't get to claim it then. But let's say it breaks out of the gate. Whether it wins, loses, gets hurt, it doesn't matter. He's my horse at the end of the race. The old owner will get his picture taken with the horse and any purse money. After that blood and urine have been taken, he then goes back to my barn. But let's say there's 5 of us here that want the same horse. After the race is run, you go down to the winner's circle, they number the cards 1 through 5, they put peas in a bottle, and you shake for it. So if the horse wins or runs well, you're like, yeah, draw my number. If it runs dead last, oh my gosh, please draw somebody else's number. So it's either luck or lack of if you get the horse or not. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
What percentage of the horses in a training race would typically claim?
I don't know an exact percentage, but quite a few will get claimed. It happens a lot. During one of our seasons from December 26th through the middle of April, we had over 200 horses claimed during that season alone. And if the horse is actually a horse that people really want, he's been doing really well and he's reasonably priced, we've had up to 21 people trying to get that horse out of a race. So there's a whole bunch of people down in that winner's circle ready for the shake. Any other questions?
I always understood that the training price was a way of keeping trainers from running a horse in a lesser race where it would probably win.
Well, we have several prices. They're from $7,000 to $125,000. So what you're going to try to do is put the horse in where he's going to be most competitive and have a chance to win. Sometimes you'll put a horse in maybe a little bit over his head, maybe because sometimes the owners will say, I really don't want to lose the horse. And then until they see that he's not running with his friends, and they'll go ahead and try to find where he belongs. So, any other questions?
How much animosity is there about claiming off of?
Oh, sometimes people get quite upset. They will get quite upset. I actually know of a circumstance that happened several years ago that you never send a person over to someone's barn and have them snoop on the horse there and stuff. You just don't do those things. But in this case, that happened. Somebody actually came as the horse, the 20-minute call time when you start getting the horse out, and a lot of times you'll hose them off and everything before they're going to run. And somebody that walked by and actually was checking the horse's legs and looking at him to see if he was okay. And they ended up claiming the horse for $80,000 that day. And they went to the stewards over the whole thing.
Is there kind of an unspoken agreement between certain trainers that they don't claim off of
And
each
some
other?
of them don't claim off of each other. That's correct too. Yes. Now the trainers actually will get a condition book, and that condition book lets them know what races there are and how much time they have to get them ready for that race. And so that condition book also dictates how much weight a horse is going to carry. If she and I keep running against each other and she keeps beating me, what's ultimately going to happen is I'm going to start carrying less weight than she is, because we're going to try to make the playing field a little more even. People say it's a 1,000, 1,200 pound horse, what's the big deal? Well, weight is a big deal, and I want to be able to carry the least amount possible. Because if I ask her to carry a 5-pound bag of sugar to me, that's not a problem. But I ask her to go carry it out to gate 3 there on Huntington Drive. Before you know it, she's going to start shifting the 5 pounds. So that's why it's dictated to us, because it is so important. And it is based a lot of times on our past performances. Now, also, Seabiscuit, the statue there. Before I go there, the jockeys will all own their own saddles. They'll own 3, 4, 5 saddles. One that literally weighs ounces to one that weighs pounds, depending upon how much weight they have to carry. If they're riding one race at 115 and the next at 118, how do they gain 3 pounds? The saddles have skirts on them that lift up, and you'll put 1.5 pounds of lead weight on each side. But let's say he's riding one at 115, the next at 125. Well, what they have is lead pads that they'll put down first, and then they'll put the saddle on top of that to gain the weight. Now this Seabiscuit statue that we saw here, that is life size. Seabiscuit was 15 2 hands. A hand is 4 inches, and you measure from the bottom of the hoof up to their withers where their mane comes down and stops. That's how you figure out their size. Now Seabiscuit only lived to be 14 years old. He died of a sudden heart attack. It devastated his owner, and he buried him up in Willits, California on his farm underneath an oak tree. He started 89 times. He won 33 races. He was actually, he was unbelievable. He was favored going to the starting gate 39 times. It took him a while to get going, but once he did, there was pretty much no stopping him. Any questions about anything so far? Okay, the George Woolf statue. A lot of people have asked me if that statue is life-size or not. I've actually read and been told two different things, so I'm not going to commit one way or the other. But George Woolf actually, back in the 1940s, he was the most sought-after stakes rider in the country. He got and demanded $1,000 in advance plus 10% of any of the purse winnings. On January 3rd, 1946, he was riding a horse named Please Me. He was in front at the clubhouse turn and suddenly fell off the horse. He actually died of head injuries 11 hours after that spill. He was only 35 years old. They believe that he had a seizure while he was riding in the race. Now that statue was not done until 1949, and it took Tex Willer 3 months to put it together. He actually used George Woolf's boots, his saddle, and his helmet in order to help create that. But that helmet back then was either made out of cork or leather, and there's not even a chin strap to hold it on. So when they were to go down in spills back then, even if it were to stay on, it really wouldn't do any good. It wasn't until 1957 that they came out with the fiberglass helmet with that chin strap. Also back then, the reins were made out of strictly leather, so when they would get going in a race and their hands would get sweaty and slippery, they would slip. So what they had to do is they put rubber bands around their last 3 fingers so that they could get friction on the reins so that that wouldn't happen. And now what they have is leather, rubber grip and leather on the reins. Also the silks room that you saw, there are between, when we're racing, between 7,000 to 8,000 silks hanging up in that room. It's very impressive. The owners will design their silks, they'll put whatever colors they like, maybe their initials or something on the back. Once they're made, they are then recorded in the racing office and then put in that room. So every time a horse comes out, their horse that's going to run, the jockey will come out wearing their colors. So I think I've touched base on pretty much everything, haven't I? That's Elizabeth. She works with me at Santa Anita, and she's been on the tour a lot too. I think I've pretty much covered everything. But
You mentioned the Seabiscuit had 89 races, is that what you said? How does that compare to in today's, or like Zenyatta would have had how many?
yeah, she only had 20, and most of them, I mean, it doesn't compare. Every once in a while, you'll find an old-time horse that'll be running quite a few races, but now you're lucky if you get 10 to 15 starts out of them, because there's so much money involved in the breeding end of it now with these really good horses that they're retiring them at a young age to take them out so that they can breed. There's just too much money involved. It's kind of sad.
What did John Henry, how many races did he?
He had just about the same, 80-something, and I don't really remember, but he ran a long time too. And then the other thing too was he was a gelding, so there was nothing else for him to do. So, but he was actually he was one of my favorite horses. He really was. And it's kind of a funny story about him. When he started out as a yearling, he sold for $1,100. When he was a 2-year-old, he sold for $2,200. And then eventually Sam Rubin bought him for $25,000. But it took him a while to get going. I mean, nobody wanted him. His conformation was horrible, and he was unruly. He was just a nasty, nasty horse. So when he was going through all this awkward stage, they actually sold his dam, his mother, for $5,000. And, you know, she wasn't worth much. Well, then as John Henry started to progress and do really, really well, they went around and they sold the mare again, and she brought $275,000. They were going to buy, some people wanted to buy his sire, and they were going to spend $5,000 for him, old Bob Bowers, and he went through an auction, and they ended up only having to pay $900 for him. So you just never know what you'll get. There was a horse that through the auction, the Green Monkey, he broke the record selling as a 2-year-old in training for $16 million. He ended up earning about $10,000 on the track, and he never won a race, and he's just standing around someplace, as far as I know, not doing much at all, because nobody even wants to breed to him. So you just don't know what you'll get with these horses. You have no idea. And that's why everybody keeps trying, because maybe one day they'll get the one. So just don't know.
As I understand it, all the thoroughbred horses are descendants of 3 horses or
The
something.
Arabians.
And breeding seems to be so important in these huge stud fees and everything, but how much variation is there? They're all inbred, and
Right.
it have to be almost a mutation to have one come out of the pack.
And that's what I'm saying. You just don't know, because look at this horse who had the breeding, he had the conformation, everything going his way. He brought $16 million, and he couldn't run a jump. And then you get a horse that's not bred as well, and it's a fluke, and it goes out there and it does really, really well. You just don't know.
But apparently there's enough of a relationship between the parents of the horse and its success that they're willing to pay those.
They're
kinds
willing
of
to pay
fees.
the price. Right, right. There was, Zenyatta had a weanling sister, Giselle. And just because it was out of the same mare as Zenyatta, and it's a weanling, it's not even a year old yet, she brought $1.5 million just because she was related to this horse. It's crazy. And boy, she has a long ways to go before you start seeing which direction those legs are going to go in, because she is such a baby. So it's crazy. It's really crazy. So any other questions? I love questions.
Where is Zenyatta now?
Kentucky. Waiting to have that baby of
Oh,
hers.
it's pregnant. Oh.
How many has she,
Huh?
how many has she had?
This is going to be her first one.
Well, this is the first. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
There's a huge difference between a male horse and a female horse in terms of their ability to breed.
Exactly. The mare is pregnant for 11 months. And a good sire, he can breed 100 mares a year, season. And the season starts February 15th, right about then. Again, because you don't want them born before January 1st, so that's why they wait until that time. So that hopefully that will not happen. But that's true.
Can you rename your Seabiscuit Tours and Yacht Tour?
No, we're still Seabiscuit. We have to get a statue of her first.
How does your life change over there when the Breeders' Cup comes?
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. But I can't wait. I
Yeah.
can't wait. It's a lot of fun.
Tons of tours, or what?
Yeah, we'll do them that whole week leading up to it. And the press is there, and the people from different countries, and they're all there because, maybe they haven't ever been to Santa Anita either, and all the cameras are out. And it's very exciting.
The stables are a lot more full.
Yes, yes.
So how many horses at that time are in the stable?
Well, we top out right at about 2,000. So. Oh, and that's the other thing. I'm sorry. I'm not used to this setting, so when I'm at home, I feel a lot better. The track opens for training at 4:45 a.m. and closes at 10 a.m. We have about 2,000 horses that train back there on a daily basis. There's about 1,500 employees who work back there, and we provide housing for about 600 of those workers. Oh, and also, I didn't tell my favorite thing to tell. Horses a lot of times will get really, really bored in their stall, and they will chew off their bandages and shred them up like puppies would. I mean, just destroy them. So we can't have that. So we will actually take chili spray and spray their bandages. However, some horses like the taste of chili. So then we have to go to stuff that's called McNasty or wood chew and try to find something that they don't like the taste of. A lot of times in the mornings, boys and girls out there on the track will like to smell for each other, and we can't have that either. So we'll actually take Vicks Vapor Rub and put it up into their nostrils. Now, also horses with white legs, they will get what's called cracked heels down right where their hair starts above their hooves. And it's crusty, scabby stuff, and it's really bad. And once it gets started, it's hard to heal. So we'll actually put Desitin or Preparation H on that to help dry it up, and it really actually does a good job. Also, a lot of times when you're working on a horse, they'll act like they want to kick you, and that's another bad thing. And they'll actually put their leg up in the air. A lot of them, at least, hopefully will warn you. And what you'll do is you'll grab their tail, pull their tail in your direction, and that's going to make them step over and put that hoof down, because a tail is a form of balance. You can actually make a horse do circles just by pulling on his tail. And a lot of times, if you ever do come over and watch a couple of races, horses will have different leads when they're running. And when they turn for home, they will be on their left lead because they're turning in that direction. So this left leg will go out further than the right. And once they start going straight, they shift and they'll go to their right lead. And when they're doing that, they're basically changing gears in a race. And you can actually see a horse will accelerate when they change leads over to the right and they're starting to come down the stretch. So that's kind of fun to watch for too. You can really see that one leg is extended further than the other, and then they switch.
At what age do they start racing?
Oh, that's a good
and what
question.
would be a normal retirement age?
Horses do start as early as 2. We actually have baby races 1/4 of a mile. They start in March. They have to have their 2-year-old birthday then. They do look for that and make sure that the horse wasn't born in May or June, because then they don't qualify. So in a lot of times, if you're lucky, they'll go to 5 or 6 years old, if you're lucky. We did have a horse the other day that retired, Illinois Storm, something like that. He was 11 years old, which was, that's old for a racehorse. And, but normally, if, like I said, if they'll last that long, to 5 to 6 years old.
I always hear people say, "Oh, the ears are pricked," or the ears. You can tell by the ears. What does that mean?
Right. The horse's ears will be pricked, and that's an okay thing. It's when they go back and they're pinned back at you. You better watch out. And a lot of racehorses, especially, they get real protective in their stall, and that's their area, and they don't want you there. So if you have a horse that's coming to his webbing, that's the thing that keeps him in their stall, and he's coming at you and he's got his ears pinned back, it would be really a good idea to step back away, because he's going to bite you. And let me tell you, that hurts too. And but some of them will come real friendly and they'll have their ears up, and then when you talk to them, they'll start doing this number because they are listening to you. That's what they're doing at that point. And also, horses do sleep standing up as well as lying down. There's ligaments that lock in the back of their knees, and so they'll actually stand there and they'll be swaying back and forth, and their drool is coming out of their mouth, and they are absolutely sound asleep standing up. So you don't ever want to come up and spook them either, because they will jump out of their skin. I've seen that too.
How did you get involved with the first thing you did?
My grandma, I've always loved horses, and my grandma actually owned horses back in the 50s, and she would take me to the races when you can always get in free the last race. So she'd pick me up from school, and we'd sit in the parking lot until that time, and she met a trainer there named Eddie Truman. And at the time, I was 13, and I said, when I'm 16, I'm going to come and work for you. So I turned 16 in August, and in December, on opening day, my mom took me to the track, and grandma, and I saw him in the walking ring. So I ran up to him and I said, I'm 16 years old now. I said, I want to work for you. And he said, start tomorrow. So I've been there ever since. And then when he didn't need me, I actually worked for Wayne Lucas. And what he would do, because they were right across the street from each other back there in the barn, and they just shipped me back and forth between the two. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I've been there ever since.
Maybe you're not the right person to ask, but going back to the 50s and 60s, I mean, racing was really at its zenith then. What is Santa Anita doing or going to do to try and, get the crowds back and just the excitement there? Like Breeders' Cup Day, but it's not like that every day.
Exactly, unfortunately. They've been trying different things, like now we have the food truck festivals and different events held out in our infield, and we're trying to get the younger people to come so that they can see it's a fun sport, and but you have to give it a chance. Horse racing is something you have to educate yourself on and know what's going on, and it's neat because a lot of times when we do have events like that out in the infield, we'll get, that was the greatest time ever. I had no idea it was that much fun, but they need the education so that they can come back again. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to try to educate the people so they know what horse racing is all about. Because it's a complicated sport. It really is.
some of these horses, when they retire, they become studs or brood mares. What about the ones who don't?
They'll actually,
Value or-
a lot of times they'll become hunter jumpers, dressage horses. I actually had one that I really wanted a nice quiet riding horse, and he was actually a lead pony. He accompanied the race horses out on the track, and I ended up getting him, and he turned into a Western pleasure horse. So they do get other homes as well. I actually, real quick, because I know we gotta go, but I had a mare that couldn't run, and she was hurt, but she was sound, but she wasn't really gonna make a riding horse, and I ended up giving her away, and she was gonna be a mom, but breed her to different, like warm bloods, do anything, and do artificial insemination with her. And I wasn't too sure about that, but they told me that by the time they get her pregnant, they have $10,000 invested in the baby already, so they take very good care of the mares. And it's worked out for her, and she ended up getting a really good home that way. So if you work hard at it, you can find a good home for your horse.
Do you get this talk to groups?
I do, and I brought tours. Right, I can, and then, but I also brought some brochures that talk about the Seabiscuit Tour and what we do there. So, and a lot of times what I'll do too is if you have a large group coming out, even for that, we can do that. And then also we have Clocker's Corner there, where you can go and sit and have breakfast and watch the horses work out, and that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun to do. Uh-huh.
I have some programs here, one from 1939, 40, and 41.
Oh my gosh, they're in good shape too.
I heard that. I wanted to see that.
I would see if the museum here is interested in them, and if not, then I'll find out about Shirley. Because they're really good.